Ken Whiting here, and in this video we're talking about paddling in the surf, playing in ocean surf, something that can be extremely fun, but it can also be a little bit overwhelming. Now, even though I live pretty far from the surf, I have had a lot of chances over the years to play and surf, and I love it. About 5 or 6 years ago, I got to go to Jamaica and we were filming a segment or an episode of the Facing Waves TV series, the TV series that I host. And one of the days we hooked up with some surfers. I was in a sea kayak, they were on surfboards, and we went out and surfed, and we got some really nice big surf. So I'm going to let you enjoy this segment from Facing Waves because a lot of you probably haven't seen it before. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to break it down and explain what's going on, some of the decisions I made, and some of the things you need to know if you're going to be paddling and surf yourself. Although the island of Jamaica is surrounded by beautiful blue ocean with great surf along much of the coastline, the surfing scene is surprisingly small and undeveloped. But even though the surf community is small, the surfers are as passionate as any. And so while we're in Kingston, we connect with Iva and Ika Wilmot, surf instructors for the local Jamnesia surf camp and two of the best surfers in the country.
My name is Iva Luke Alexander Wilmot. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My dad started the surf camp when we're in Bull Bay, Jamaica, and it is called Jamnesia Surf Camp.
The way the waves move through the Caribbean, they move from east to west, and Jamaica is like a boat pointing straight towards the east, and the waves come from the east and hit Jamaica like that. So the waves like wrap on the south coast and the north coast, and the further east you go, the more waves you're gonna get. Most of the time we end up surfing like 2 or 3 spots because it just becomes like routine, you know. You wake up in the morning, the wind's offshore and it's really good, we all go to the lighthouse.
Well, there's not a lot of surfers in Jamaica, I can tell you that. A surf spot like this in a lot of places would be packed. But what they lack in quantity, they definitely make up for in quality. These guys are ripping. But enough watching, it's my turn to play.
Jamaican surfing is really good in the fact that the community is not that big.
Oftentimes when you enter a surfing scene, you've got to be very guarded. You've got to be very respectful of the surfers because quite often there tends to be some territorialism and they're not necessarily going to be that welcoming to outsiders. That was not the case at all in Jamaica.
It makes it pretty unique. Better than a lot of other places I've been where when you get out in the water, everyone's like not even looking at you. You paddle past someone and say hi to them and it looks like they're almost offended by you trying to say hi and be polite, you know? Where here it's like you paddle out in the water, it's kind of offensive if you don't say hi, you know?
The sea kayak is definitely not the ideal craft for surf. I mean, the track kayak with its adjustable rocker helped a great deal, but it's not the ideal surf machine. Those guys were in the ideal surf machines, those boards, those short boards. A few times the waves peaked and curled and slammed me good, and to be honest, I haven't paddled in the surf for quite a while, and that was a wake-up call saying, wow, the power of these waves. I mean, these aren't even that big of waves, but when a wave peaks, curls, and hits you, it's like getting hit with a 2x4. One of the coolest things you can do in a kayak is launch off these waves when you're paddling out. If you can hit the wave right as it's peaking before it starts curling, you can stay on the surface and literally take off. After meeting Iva and Ika, Jamnesia is exactly what I expected to find. It's such a cool little surf camp they have set up.
It's like a little micro community they've developed there for people to come and just get absorbed into that Jamaican surfing culture.
And that's what we're doing here in Jamnesia Surf Camp. It's just family run. You can come and hang out with us, eat what we eat, surf what we surf, and just vibes. Yeah, man.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that little segment. What I liked most about it is the fact that I clearly haven't changed one bit in 6 years. I look just as young now as I did then. Something like that. The first thing I want to talk about there with that segment is when I got there and we hit the water, those guys went and surfed for a while, and I was happy to let them go and surf for a while because I took about 15 to 20 minutes just to sit back and watch them. And they know this spot as well as anyone. And so I tried to absorb as much of what they knew about that spot as I could from just watching. Where were they catching these waves? Where were they sitting past the break? Where were they paddling out? What were they expecting the waves to do? And so I was watching them, but then I was also learning from the sets. I was watching the sets of waves come in and going, okay, how much time is there in between sets? How many waves typically are there in a set? Where are the sets breaking? And where is the safe zone? Where is the best place to launch and to paddle out? Lots of different things. And that is a great thing to do. And even though you're excited to get on the water, it's a really great thing to do anytime you get to a surf spot, is stand there, sit there, whatever, take your time and learn about the location from the shore, from a very controlled environment, before we even think about getting your paddle wet. So what kayak was I using? Many of you may recognize this kayak because I've been using it for 20 years, off and on. But it's the Track kayak. That was the original Track. Now there's the Track 2.0, which is very similar, just a few upgrades. The Track kayak, what's really amazing about it, for one, it's a portable kayak. So I flew there to Jamaica with that kayak. It fits in a roller bag the size of a roller golf bag. And so it's just so easy to travel with. And then it assembles within about 15 minutes into a 16-foot sea kayak. And you could see the conditions I was dealing with. This is not just a mild weather boat. I have tested that kayak in a variety of rough water conditions. In fact, when Track first started 20 years ago, before they even launched to market, they contacted me and said, we want you to see how far this boat goes. If it does as much as we think it can, and so here's a kayak, break it, and tell us what it took to break it. And so I put it through the ringer that year, and it took me running a waterfall in it to actually break a small part of it. But incredibly, I have a lot of trust in it, and so I really wasn't worried about the kayak in those conditions. The kayak was a real asset in those conditions, and the reason is the kayak, it's two pieces of frame that go into that skin. And then where the two pieces of frame, the bow and the stern sections, connect, there are these hydraulic jacks, and you jack them out, push those frames into the skin, and it all tightens right up and becomes nice and relatively rigid. Now, one of those jacks is on the keel, or the center line on the bottom of the kayak. And so as you tighten it, that bottom one, it can only stretch the skin so much, and then it has nowhere to go but to bend the kayak. And so you can actually control the rocker of the kayak. And so for surf, that's ideal. You want to have the most rocker possible in order to conform to the waves as much as possible. That's one of the drawbacks of sea kayaks, is they're just too long and straight, so they're not great surf boats. But the Track was a better surf boat. It is a better surf boat than most sea kayaks because you can give it so much rocker. So what are the best kayaks for ocean surf? Well, the best kayaks are surf kayaks, ones specifically designed for surfing ocean waves. But lots of other kayaks you can take out and surf and have a great time. Whitewater kayaks are really fun in the surf. The drawback of whitewater kayaks is they're slow. In particular, they're slow when you're surfing because a whitewater kayak has a lot of rocker. And the rocker in the stern, in the back of the kayak, it actually, when you're surfing the wave, it slows you down because it kind of let the boat bow comes up and the stern goes down and you plow water. So it's not a fast boat like a surf kayak. Touring kayaks and sea kayaks, like the track. You know, any surf kayak, some sea kayak or touring kayak that has thigh hooks, that has bulkheads, so that if you do end up swimming, the whole boat isn't going to get swamped, just the center is going to fill up with water. Some are better than others, but they're fun. They're not ideally suited for surf kayaking because, in large part, because they're designed to travel forward in a straight line as efficiently as possible. And you want a maneuverable kayak on surf waves. Sit-on-top kayaks, both hard shell and inflatable sit-on-top kayaks, are also super fun in the surf. A nice thing is if you do fall off, you can just hop right back on them in the surf. And so that makes them a lot more user-friendly than sit-inside kayaks like whitewater kayaks or touring kayaks. The downside of sit-on-top kayaks is that, you know, they tend to be slow and they're so wide that you can't edge them. And so you can't really carve. They're not nearly as dynamic as other types of surfing boats. The only real type of kayak you don't want to take into the surf is recreational kayaks. Kayaks that, for one, don't take a skirt, and so you hit one wave and you're just going to be swamped. But also those kayaks tend to not have bulkheads in them, or they only have one bulkhead. But still. And what those wall bulkheads being walls inside the kayak that separate the kayak into compartments. So if you do get swamped, the whole kayak isn't just going to fill up with water and be this insanely heavy, almost half submerged craft that is really hard to do anything with. The bulkheads they're like life jackets for your kayak, and makes a huge difference, especially in surf. They're the only type of kayaks that you don't want to get out there. Although I should mention that any sit-inside kayak, whether it's whitewater kayak or a touring or sea kayak, where you're enclosed with the skirt, you really do want to take instruction before going out and surf. I was doing the best that I could surfing the waves with a sea kayak, especially big waves like that. But those guys on surfboards were they were carving it up, and they humored me. But where I had as much fun as surfing was paddling out, because you can launch off the waves, and that's something those guys couldn't do, and they were like, ooh, that's cool. And the key to launching off the waves was a few keys. The first one is you need to hit maximum speed when you're paddling out and hit the wave just as it's peaking, right before it's breaking. If you get there too early, the wave won't be steep enough to catch air, and you might get your bow up, but you won't catch air. If you're there just a fraction too late, and that wave, it may not even started breaking yet, but it's about to break, and all of a sudden you're going to take a wall of water in the face. When that happens, when you're a little late and the wave is breaking and is breaking on you, there's a couple of things you can do when that happens, because it's inevitable it's going to happen if you're playing around conditions like that. The first one is take a final last stroke. Boom. A good hard forward stroke into the wave, so that as it hits you, you're pulling yourself through that wave. Not only does that prevent or help stop your kayak from getting sucked backwards into the breaking wave, where you will likely get a little beating. But that stroke you're taking is also effectively acting as a brace, so that you're bracing yourself when this wave hits you hard, and you're pulling yourself through. Now, the other thing that I really like to do when I'm doing that is I take that last stroke, and as I'm taking that stroke, I will tuck my head in behind the arm, and that saves my face from getting just it's like getting a punch in the face. No, it's anything hard, but it's amazing how much power that wall of water can hit you with. In fact, something I would highly recommend if you're going to be spending a chunk of time surfing, playing around in surfing kayaks, or in anything, is get earplugs. Because when you might turn your head that way, but when you take that hit of water, it has a way of injecting cold water into your ear. And if you do that that being done over a long period of time, it creates a real problem, something called exotosis, which basically your body grows these bony points inside to stop that cold water from coming inside your ear. But effectively, it ends up stopping anything. It stops when you do go swimming or do anything and you get a little bit of water in there, even go for a shower, that water won't drain out easily, and you get a lot of more infections, and ultimately you lose your hearing. There's surgery to correct it, and I have a number of friends that have gone through it, and it sounds miserable. And so wear earplugs. And there are some great earplugs out right now. What are the ones I use? The Surfer's Ear, I think they're called. I'm not sure about that. I'll leave a link in the description box to the ones that I've been using. But they have a one-way valve that allows sound in, but stops the water. So you can still hear pretty darn well. You're not just jamming a silicone ball or earplugs that really make it impossible to hear other people. Now, when it comes to safety when playing in ocean surf, the first thing I would say is if you're going to be paddling a sit-inside kayak of any type out there, then you really need to have some type of training to know how to deal with you and your gear when the inevitable happens and you go for a swim in surf. You learn simple things like when you're coming back to shore with your boat, to not get between your boat full of water and the shoreline, because all it takes is a wave coming in, grabbing that boat, it'll throw it into you, and it can do some serious damage to you if you get in between your boat and the beach, the shoreline. Simple rules like that, but also more involved things like rescues, towing, getting back into your boat from the water. And then there's also, you really need to know about the area that you're surfing. You need to know things like, are there riptides here? And if so, where? Where are they, and what do I need to be on the lookout for? Are there creatures you need to be worried about? Jellyfish, sea urchins. I mean, who knows what else? Are there rocks under the surface? Sometimes beaches, they can look beautiful, like perfect sandy beaches, but in the water, not far underneath, there'll be rocks or reefs, and you need to know about those things. This involves doing some research. A lot of this information is online, but asking the locals who are there, finding out beforehand and not finding out the hard way. So now let's talk surfing, because surfing rocks. Surfing is so much fun. But surfing in a sea kayak in ocean waves is tricky, especially in big ocean waves. And the biggest reason for that is, well, for one, they're long. Sea kayaks are long, and they're designed to go in a straight line. They're not designed to be highly maneuverable. And maneuverability is an asset when you're surfing waves. The problem that those two things creates is, well, a surf wave, when it stands up, it's got quite a bit of curvature. In fact, there's more curvature to a surf wave than to the bottom of your kayak. And so your kayak, when it gets that steep, it's just going to, the bow is going to pierce into the oncoming water. Also, when that happens, your kayak has no choice but to be pushed to one side or the other. And now it's going to be on a carving angle, and it's going to want to carve right off the wave, one direction or the other. Now, as it's carving across the wave, once again, these kayaks are designed to stay on course. And so it's going to carve very efficiently right off the wave, unless you can somehow rudder hard, or stern pry, whatever you want to call, and bring it back and straighten it out. That's very hard to do because the boats don't want to do that. And it's even harder to do on big waves because you have so much momentum shooting you off the wave. Smaller waves, you tend to be able to cut the boat back, change directions, and that's usually done at the apex of the wave. At the top of the wave, when your boat gets near the top of the wave, you're almost balanced at the top. You're able to turn at that point because you don't have water resistance on your whole boat. You can crank the boat around, turn in the other direction, and carve in the other direction. That's getting a lot more advanced about surfing. Bottom line is, surfing sea kayaks is really tricky. Your best bet is to start in small waves because they're actually, for the most part, you get better surfs in small waves with sea kayaks too. So there's not too much reason to go bigger. Well, that does it. That's all I got to say about surf kayaking. I hope you guys enjoyed that segment from Jamaica. It was neat for me to watch. I hadn't seen that in years, and it really was a cool experience. What a cool surf scene in Jamaica. If you have any comments, questions, leave them down below. I'm happy to answer questions, of course. And otherwise, give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to Paddle TV if you haven't already, and subscribe to my other channel, Ken Whiting Adventures, if you haven't. And we'll see you again for another paddling tip and gear review or paddling adventure on my other channel. Thanks for watching.